Hello and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Modelcraft Bench, and welcome back to the Blackbird build. I'm proceeding with colouring in the engine here. This is the engine which will be mounted on the display stand when it's all done, and just for reference I have said display stand here, and this is the actual prop part. I've cleaned up some super heavy seam lines on these edges. I hope if I can catch the light right, you can see this is all quite distorted and lumpy looking. I had planned on a sort of a high gloss finish for this stand, but given the state of this, I'm not going to bother because it would take me ages to sort all of that out. The base itself, large, quite thick plastic, again a lot of sink marks because of these webs on the back, and I've also filled the mounts. There were two sets of these mounts because there are two engines for display included in the kit, but I did not want to go through the pain of building two of these engines, so I've filled these two slots, and this is just a brush painted coat of Mr. Surfacer 500, which will be flatted when it's had a bit of time to cure properly, because that was only done this morning. Anyway, I digress. That's the base. Still haven't decided what colour to paint that, so if anybody wants to give me any suggestions in the comments as to what colour might look good, then feel free. But that said, it will probably be painted by the time this video goes out. So the engine then. First things first, I masked off the base part, the sort of props. Those are just matte black, and the whole thing was base coated initially in XF85, just normal matte black Tamiya, before I started to try and add the colours, which at the minute I think in this light it doesn't look all that colourful, but I'll just go through what I've done so far. So the main areas of the engine, and I'll point, so this section and the back section were initially painted with AK Extreme Burnt Metal, and this is quite a dark colour, but because I painted it over black, it's darker still. If you were to put this over a light grey plastic, you'd get a much lighter finish unless you put a huge amount of coats on. So that is why I put the black on. So here, here and here have been done with this. I then used AK's metallic blue on this very front area, and I didn't like it. It looked too pale. I shouldn't have mixed it up because the sort of thinners in the top was just the right colour that I was looking for, but when I mixed it up it went too pale. So I overcoated that with a little bit of Alclad Hot Metal Violet. Now, I've whinged before on here about ammo of MIG washes clumping together and becoming unusable, and unfortunately in my experience that's something that also happens to Alclads. I don't know if it's going to show on film, but if you can see that weirdness in here, that's huge lumps where the particles in the paint have sort of come out of suspension almost. They've clumped together, and to be honest, just like the ammo stuff, when it gets to this stage it's borderline unusable. I did use some on here, but it promptly clogged up my airbrush, which meant I had to strip it down and clean all the clumps out, so that's now gone in the bin. So I did put a bit of that on, still didn't like it, so I went back in finally with some X23 clear blue, and that's got me here. You can see there's a sort of a hot metal hue right at the front there. The forward part was then masked off, and this sort of front edge around the compressor section was done with pale burnt metal, again Alclad. This has been decanted out of an old bottle, that's why it's all crossed out. Where did we go next? We're not using that in the end. Steel. This is Alclad steel. That's been used to highlight, in a way, this part and this part, just these two small areas here, and you can see that they look a fair bit paler. And then finally, for now, hot metal sepia, very useful this one. I've used that on this band in the middle here, and I've used it on these big external pipelines that this engine has. I've literally used all of the same colours and techniques on these in various amounts. Let's show you this one, to get the sort of hotness that I was looking for. So we're not finished yet, but I thought this would be as good a time as any to do a little bit of a sort of initial progress update. Here's what the photograph I'm working from. I took this myself. This is my own photo taken with my mobile phone of the engine at Duxford. So that's what I'm using as a basis, and you can see that there are two areas here. So this portion and the sort of most of this end can area, which are a really weird colour, kind of a brown colour. So I'm going to mix something up to do that, and obviously do some masking, and I'm going to use XF-49 khaki as the basis for that. I'm going to be getting on with that shortly, and then I shall go back in probably with some sort of clear blue and some hot metal sepia, or maybe some smoke, just to bring these heated areas in. And once that's done, it will really just be a case of picking out all the sort of pipe work as best I can. Some of it is just going to end up being dry brushed, to be absolutely honest, but if I just bring it up again so you can see, this is where we're at so far. And it does look quite shiny, and that's because I've just used some X22, heavily thinned X22 over the whole thing. And again, I've spoken before about using intercoats. I've got to this point and I've added the coat of clear, essentially to protect the work I've done, so that further masking isn't going to pull things off or leave marks. And if I get something a little bit wrong, you know, when I'm doing these pipelines and such, it just gives you that little minuscule chance that you might be able to correct it without damaging the underlying paint. So that's why I do it. And this is now going to get set aside for a decent amount of time to fully harden, so that I can mask with impunity, really, to go forward. So this part of the video comes to you from a fairly grumpy Genesis, because I'm absolutely certain I recorded at least 2 segments for this portion of the Blackbird build, but of course I can only find one, and it's not the first time I've recorded stuff and then managed to lose it or deleted it before I've ended up editing it. But it's quite annoying because it's missed out quite a lot of work on this little engine, which is almost done, as you can see. It's probably another hour's work finishing this, but I figured it's probably useful to see it at this point anyway. So from the previous video, this was all black. I'd blued it up and I'd greyed it up in a few places. I since added these khaki bands, which I did indeed use XF-49 Tamiya khaki, and I basically mixed silver into it to make it a little bit more metallic, and that changes the hue a bit, it lightens it somewhat. And then this back part was then treated, I used panzer putty, and then it was sprayed with transparent blue in various amounts to recreate that sort of darkened and burnt look that I could see in the pictures. And this is a bit more, it's brighter, if you like, than the real thing in the pictures, but it's pretty neat. And from there I've glossed it and flattered it until I was happy with the finish generally, and then set about painting all this pipe work. It's all moulded in, so it's never going to look uber realistic, and it is a pain. It's a pain to do it, but do it I have been, and here you can see a bit closer. So this is mostly Mr. Metal Colour aluminium applied with a paintbrush, but I do mix other colours into it in various places. You can see there's more of a golden tint back here where it's a bit hotter. Just a fine paintbrush using the sort of the side of the point rather than the end, just to catch the tops of all this moulded in pipework. So that's what it looks like before painting, and that's how it looks after painting. And I'm not going to lie, it has taken a minute to get all of that done. But once that's done, this final portion here, that is the engine complete, and that will sit on the completed base, which is here. And I went with metallic grey in the end. It's a satin finish after all that sanding and messing about to get this smooth. satin finish, and that just plugs in there, and there's your base. Adds a bit of interest, I think. And what I think I might try and do is to find some kind of sticker or decal to put here, just to add a bit more interest there. But there, that's how that's going to look with the model on it. So I'm really, it is a bit bright, the finish, the colours pop a little bit too much, but given that it would be in the shadow of the model, when the model's on top of it, it pretty much goes all over. So I think the fact that it's a bit bright will kind of work in our favour. So that's how that's all going, and that's how that looks. And overall, I have to say I'm reasonably happy with it for what it is. For the model itself then, it's in various stages depending on the parts, but I've been forging ahead essentially with the one outer wing sort of pod, sort of almost testing as I go, really, to be honest with you. So this has been painted, shaded, cleared with X22, and as you can see, it's not turbo shiny. The thing is, it doesn't have to be. I'm not going to get into the whole clear coat debate thing with decals. There isn't really any strong or reasonable argument to say that you shouldn't do it, because doing it doesn't cause problems and not doing it can. So on that basis, it's a no-brainer, but it doesn't have to be a show and shine winning worthy gloss finish. It just has to be smooth. You just have to seal that flat finish in and have a nice smooth surface to put your decals on. And these are not the kit decals, as you recall. I've got this Caracal model sheet because the kit decals were pants and broke. This thing. And these are printed by Cartograph, and you get a lot in here. I've already shown it in another video. Get a lot in there for your money, but it's arguable whether that's worth it or not, because who's going to build 12 48 scale Blackbirds? Ultimately no one, I suspect, but 20 odd quid, you get everything you're going to need, including stencils, so that's nice. And that's what these decals are. As you'd expect, being Cartograph, they work absolutely fine. If I come up nice and close to there, you can see absolutely no issues. Same here. The light's doing a bit too much reflecting, but that's gone in there absolutely fine. And even though that's not been overcoated with anything, at a slight angle you can't even see it now. And then if I flip her over, I've got matte coat on the bottom. So that's this stuff, Magic VMS satin, not matte. The matte sucks the life out of everything. It's too matte for almost everything. It's certainly too matte for this. So this is actually the satin, and I sprayed it through my Fender BD116, which has a 0.8mm setup in it. And I did that because I love this varnish. It's brilliant, and it doesn't make everything grey. It's nice and smooth, and it's dead easy to use. But that ease of use depends on you getting a nice wet coat on the model, and it's very, very difficult to get some. I've took a bit of the label off. I don't know if you can. It's really quite thick, and if you thin it, it reduces its properties, I've found. So it really needs to be applied as is, but it is quite heavy bodied to get through even a 0.5 setup to get a nice wet coat on something. So that's actually why I bought the BD116 with the 0.8 in it. And yeah, I can confirm it works, as you can see. You can also see, I imagine, how much that flat coat has subdued the shading. It's still there, you can see it, but it really isn't obvious anymore, which is fine. That's the way I like things. But if you're one of those modellers who likes things to be a bit more obvious, you're going to need to step it up a bit before you put this flat coat on. But you can also see how it hasn't made it go grey or milky in any way, which is a first for me for a flat coat on a black finish. It's absolutely lovely. The reason I've only done the bottom is because it does take a little bit longer to dry than a lot of model paints. It is water based, yes, but because you put such a wet coat on, it will take quite a while, so there is no way to really hold this to paint both sides at once. So there's your difference. So this part of the wing's been flat coated and this area hasn't. That's how we look. I did have quite a bit of trouble over these corrugated areas with these markings. They did go in, and they are perfectly nice now that they are in, but it's not the decal's fault, or mine to be fair. The Revell have moulded these corrugates as steps. They're not rounded at all. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be, but they're square steps like castellations, and it's very, very difficult for a decal to do that. To get it to go all the way down into those bottom corners was very, very difficult. I did manage it, but it took Deco Red, which is like the DEFCON 1 of decal solutions, and you have to be very careful with it because you can ruin your decals just as quickly as you can help them with that stuff. So yes, it was tricky, bit annoying, but it is what it is. But they're on now, so that's the process. The rest of the model has to catch up then, and in the next, which will be the final instalment of the Blackbird build, I will add the pilots and their seats, put the model together, put it on the stand and have a final wash up of what has been a pretty epic build, something that I thought initially wouldn't take too long. It has ended up taking quite a while, and I am very grumpy about losing the footage from this video because it does detract greatly, I think. But anyway, enough said. Here's where we're at. Next instalment will be the last one. So with that said, I'm just going to draw a line under this video and move on to the next one for this series. So yeah, annoying, but anyway, you all go ahead and look after yourselves and look after each other. I'll see you next time. Genesis out.